I lived through my worst nightmare, and it all started with a laser-guided tape measure. Karen Winters, the HOA president, called the cops on my pregnant wife. Her complaint? Leah's footsteps were too loud. Public disturbance, she said. She claimed she was protecting the neighborhood. But when the cops arrived and sided with Leah, the only thing disturbed was Karen's ego. Let me take you back. The first time I saw Karen, she was pointing what looked like military tech at my front yard. A laser-guided tape measure aimed at a single blade of grass, allegedly a quarter-inch too tall. Leah, 7 months pregnant and glowing with serenity, thought it was harmless, quirky even. I knew better. I've met people like Karen. People who don't seek peace, they seek control. Down to the millimeter. They're not neighbors, they're dictators in linen pants. I wiped my hands on a shop rag and walked out of the garage, where I'd been working on my old motorcycle, my happy place. Can I help you? I asked with a tone that said, I don't want to. Karen didn't flinch. She looked me up and down, her gaze sticking to the grease stain on my shirt like it was a health code violation. You must be the new owner of 112 Willow Lane, she said, as if accusing me of a crime. Karen Winters, president of the Homeowners Association. Alex, I replied. No last name. And you're on my lawn. She pointed at the offending blade of grass. Violation of Bylaw 17C, subsection B. Grass must not exceed 3 inches. This one is 3.25. You have 24 hours to rectify it, or face a fine. I nearly laughed, until I saw the look in her eyes. It wasn't about grass. It was about power. Across the street, her husband Richard leaned against a spotless white Mercedes, smirking like it was all a game. He gave me a little salute. My blood started to boil. Then Leah stepped out, glowing and gentle, lemonade in hand. Hi there, I'm Leah. Karen recoiled like kindness was contagious. Your husband was just informed of a violation, she said, eyeing Leah's belly. You'll want to avoid stress. It's bad for the baby. It wasn't concern. It was a threat. And it landed. Leah's smile faltered. That was it for me. The grass, the laser, the smirk, that was noise. But threatening my wife and unborn child? That was war. I stepped forward, fists clenched. My voice was low, deliberate. You're going to get off my property, and you're never going to speak to my wife again. Understood? Karen blinked. Shock then fury. Richard stood up, smugness gone. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Karen hissed. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. She turned and stormed off. It wasn't empty. People like her don't bluff. The war for Willow Lane had begun. And that single blade of grass? Just the tip of the iceberg. We didn't move to Eagle's Landing for drama, we moved to escape it. We wanted peace. Bike rides. Fresh air. Quiet. We'd saved for years, living in a tiny apartment that always smelled like garlic and regret. I ran my IT security business from the corner of our living room. Leah managed projects with the precision of a military strategist. When we found out she was pregnant, the city felt too small. We wanted space. A nest. Eagle's Landing looked perfect. Tree-lined streets, community potlucks, modest homes with big yards. We paid the HOA fee without a second thought. The first month was bliss. We painted the nursery a soft yellow, named the color Sunrise for Hope, after the name we'd already chosen. I ripped up the old shag carpet while Leah sipped decaf from a lawn chair like a tiny general. Our neighbors seemed friendly. The Johnsons brought pie. The Millers had kids and a golden retriever. And then there was Stan. Stan lived 2 doors down in a house that screamed rebellion. Wildflowers everywhere, a psychedelic mushroom mailbox, and a battalion of pink flamingos posed in daily tableaus. New blood, huh? He said one afternoon, leaning on our fence. Welcome to the Thunderdome. I laughed. He didn't. You've met the Queen, I assume. Queen Karen, first of her name, breaker of bylaws, mother of misery. I chuckled, but he was dead serious. Keep your head down. Grass short. And don't put your trash out before 7 p.m. on Sunday. She's always watching. I filed it under colorful neighbor. I should have filed it under survival manual. The first RAAL warning came weeks before the lawn incident. We installed a small wooden ramp at the front door, for Leia's safety. 3 days later, a letter arrived on gold-embossed stationery, violation of Covenant 34F, remove immediately. Leia stayed calm. She filled out the proper forms, explaining the medical need. Denied. Reason? Aesthetic incongruity. I was livid. She was pregnant, not designing a magazine spread. But Leia said, deep breaths. We pick our battles. So we took it down. We thought we were being mature. But to a bully, backing down is never maturity. It's an invitation. The next day, we got a $50 fine for unkept grass. I paid it. A week later, $75 for a wreath that was allegedly 2 inches too wide. We removed it. Paid again. Then came the real harassment. Our sprinklers were turned on at night, flooding the front door. Water seeped through our bedroom windows. Hardwood floors buckled. I installed cameras, my specialty. I ran them through a local server and backed everything to the cloud. Then the packages started disappearing. A baby monitor, diapers, a nursery chair. Gone within minutes of delivery. When I checked the footage, our view was suddenly blocked. A new garden gnome had appeared in Karen's yard. Its smile smug and knowing. The breaking point came on a sweltering Tuesday. Leia waddled to the mailbox, hand on her belly. Suddenly, a blast of water erupted from Karen's industrial-strength sprinklers, aimed directly at the box. The spray hit Leia hard. She stumbled, slipped, crashed to the ground. I saw it happen through the living room window. 1 second she was there, the next she was down. My heart stopped. I've never moved so fast in my life. 1 second I was watching Leia fall, the next I was tearing across the yard, a roar of panic blanking my thoughts. She was on her hands and knees, sobbing, soaked to the bone. The baby, she cried, her voice ragged with fear. Alex, I fell right on my stomach. Across the street, the water shut off as suddenly as it had started. Karen Winters stood on her porch, remote in hand, no longer hiding. No excuses, no denial. Just pure, unapologetic malice glowing in her eyes. Richard stood beside her, arms crossed, a smirk stretching across his smug face. They had waited, but calculated, and then they'd struck. I helped Leia up, my hands shaking, not with panic, but with a rage so white-hot it felt like it might tear me apart. I got her inside, checked her over. Bruised, soaked, shaken. But the baby was still moving. We called her doctor. They told us to come in immediately. As I helped Leia to the car, I looked back. Karen and Richard still stood on their porch like smug gargoyles, proud of the damage they'd done. But the boiling fury in my chest was cooling, hardening into something sharper, deadlier. They had crossed a line, and I just picked my battlefield. This wasn't about bylaws or grass. This was personal. This was war. The drive to the doctor was the longest hour of my life. Leia clutched my arm the whole way, fingers digging into my skin, the other hand protectively wrapped around her belly. I drove in silence, the image of her falling looping in my mind. The sound of her cry. Karen's smug, victorious grin. The doctor was kind, gentle, thorough. After a battery of checks, we got the best news of our lives. The baby was okay. Bruised ribs, some soreness, but no lasting harm. The relief hit me like a tidal wave. But it didn't wash away the anger. It clarified it. The Alex who might have kicked down Karen's door and shouted her into the ground was gone. In his place was someone colder, smarter, more dangerous. When we got home, I pulled up the footage from the front camera. There was the sprinkler erupting, Leia falling, Karen on the porch, remote in hand. It wasn't Hollywood clear, but it was enough. Our first real weapon. Leia saw the look in my eyes and didn't try to calm me this time. Her own fear had settled into something simmering and still. What are we going to do, Alex? I grabbed a fresh legal pad. We're going to build a case. We documented everything. Every fine, every incident. Leia made a spreadsheet, columns for date, time, evidence, cost. A masterpiece of righteous vengeance. I handled surveillance. Upgraded all our cameras. Added night vision. Installed legal audio recorders. Created an encrypted server to store everything. Our home became a fortress, with every camera aimed across the street. But Karen and Richard mistook our silence for surrender. They escalated. Anonymous complaints to city agencies. Fire trucks showing up for fake gas leaks. Animal control arriving to investigate a barking dog we didn't own. Each time, we calmly explained. Showed documentation. Logged it all. Neighbor Stan, God bless him, became our unlikely inside man. He dropped by under the guise of friendly visits, delivering covert intel between sips of beer. Richard was on the phone with the city again this morning. He'd whisper. Something about your fence being over the line. Karen's been asking the post office about mail holds. He'd add another day. Might be time for a P.O. box. Stan and his flamingos were our resistance network. But the stress was relentless. Leah wasn't sleeping. Every creak of the house made her jump. I barely slept either, spending nights combing through public records, digging for anything on the Winters. Anything to explain this campaign of cruelty. But they were clean. Too clean. No tickets, no lawsuits. Their digital trail was polished to perfection. It didn't feel natural. It felt manufactured. Then came the night that changed everything. I was reviewing footage when I saw Richard creeping along our side yard, carrying a small black box. He knelt by the main utility panel. Seconds later, our power went out. Not just our house, the whole block. I ran to the window. Richard stood in the yard, staring at our house like he was proud. He wasn't just harassing us anymore. He was proving he could control our world. And I had him. On camera. Tampering with utilities. A federal crime. I could call the cops. End it. But I didn't. Because suddenly I didn't just want to stop them. I wanted to destroy them. This wasn't just personal vendetta. It was strategy. Their malice was too precise, too organized. So I pivoted. I stopped looking at what they were doing outside. I started hunting for what they were hiding inside. The digital side of their lives. I'm an expert in cybersecurity. I help companies identify weaknesses before hackers can strike. Now I would be the hacker. The HOA website was a joke. Outdated plugins, gaping vulnerabilities. In under an hour, I was in. Silent. Invisible. I searched everything, minutes, forms, complaints, until I found the jackpot, a folder marked financials. Inside, invoices, payments, spreadsheets. One name kept popping up, Suburban Enhancement Services LLC. Every month, the HOA paid them 5 figures for vague work, beautification, improvements, maintenance. But the company didn't exist, at least not in any real way. No address. No phone. Just a stock photo website. I pulled state records. Paid the fee. And there it was. Owner, Richard Winters. I froze. Then I smiled. They weren't just tyrants. They were thieves. The fines, the dues, the power grabs. Karen and Richard were using the HOA as a piggy bank. Embezzling tens of thousands, maybe more. This wasn't harassment. It was racketeering. They created problems, grass, wreaths, decorations, just to levy fines and justify payouts to their shell company. And we were the new threat. The ones who might ask questions. The attack on Leah wasn't random. It was a warning. A message to fall in line. But they'd underestimated me. Now I had the proof. Spreadsheets. Bank transfers. The shell company. Richard's name. A digital arsenal that could bury them. But I didn't want to bury them in court. Not yet. They didn't deserve a quiet takedown. They deserved to fall loudly. Publicly. And permanently. Leah was asleep. A rare, precious moment of peace. I watched her on the baby monitor, her chest rising and falling with slow, steady rhythm. My duty was clear. Protect her. Protect the child growing inside her. But how? The question had been gnawing at me for days. How far was I willing to go? I'd already crossed a line by hacking the HOA server. Was I prepared to go further? The house was silent as I stood before the whiteboard, outlining 3 paths in scrawled marker. Option A, the police. Pros, legal moral high ground. Cons, slow, uncertain, room for retaliation. Option B, anonymous leak. Pros, immediate fallout. The community turns on them. Cons, uncontrollable. Could backfire. Karen might cry fake. Option C, the Alex option. Pros, surgical. Strategic. Cons, illegal. Dangerous. But potentially perfect. Use the information as bait. Not to destroy them from afar, but to lure them in. Trick them into revealing everything, on camera. A confession no lawyer could spin. It felt dangerous. The next day, I found Stan in his yard, arranging his flamingos into what looked like a miniature reenactment of the Battle of Waterloo. I handed him a cold beer. I didn't tell him everything, just the harassment. The sprinklers, the fake fines, the power cut. I need them to stop, I said. Permanently. Stan took a long sip, eyes narrowing as he studied Karen's house. You know, he said, brushing foam from his mustache, back in the 70s, we had this one bastard in the history department. Ran the place like a little fiefdom. Bully. Dean wouldn't touch him. He paused, lifting a flamingo wearing a bicorn hat. Then one day, his prized medieval manuscript collection just vanished. A week later, one page shows up in his mailbox. With a note, retire or the rest get pulped. Stan chuckled. He announced his early retirement the next day. Sometimes, you don't fight a dragon with a pea shooter. You need another dragon. It was absurd. Possibly fictional. But it was exactly what I needed to hear. He wasn't telling me to break the law. He was telling me to think like them. Use their arrogance. Their greed. And that's when the plan crystallized. I wouldn't just leak the data. I'd weaponize it. They were stealing through a shell company. That meant they were greedy. They were arrogant, convinced of their untouchability. Those two weaknesses would be their downfall. I spent the next 2 days crafting a fake RFP, request for proposal, for a massive HOA-wide security upgrade. High-end surveillance. 24/7 monitoring. Ridiculously bloated budget. I used the HOA letterhead I'd pulled from the hacked server. Made it look pristine. Official. Tempting. Then I created a fake identity, a tech mogul moving in, named Mr. Thompson. Wealthy. Private. Eager to spend. From a dummy email account, I sent the RFP to the entire HOA board. Suggested preferential treatment for a local contractor to support community businesses. I knew exactly who Karen would recommend. The next morning, I watched from my window as she opened her mailbox. I saw the moment she read the letter. Saw her eyes widen. She bolted inside, waving the RFP like a lottery ticket. They took the bait. 2 days later, my burner phone rang. Mr. Thompson? Came a voice thick with false sweetness. Karen Winters. We're thrilled about your proposal, she gushed. Security is very important to us. I deepened my voice. I don't invest in communities without it. Well, she purred, perhaps we could meet in person. I know a local vendor who's just wonderful. Actually, the property's still under renovation, I said smoothly. But the previous owner, Alex Carter, is a close friend. He'll meet with you on my behalf. Perfect, Karen said, already envisioning the contract. Tomorrow night? 7 sharp. I hung up. The trap was set. For the next 24 hours, our house became mission control. Leia, on strict bed rest now, sat in her recliner surrounded by monitors, laptops, cables. Cameras 1 through 4 online, she reported. Audio hot. All feeds backed up to remote servers. If anything goes wrong, I'm calling the cops. No heroics, she added firmly. Promise me. I promise. I did one final check. For hidden cameras, bookshelf, smoke detector, frame, plant. Dual audio feeds. Everything streamed to Leia and to encrypted cloud storage. At exactly 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. Karen and Richard stood on the porch in full business mode. She wore a sleek blazer, her smile practiced. He carried a leather briefcase, confidence oozing from every pore. Mr. Carter, Karen said brightly, offering her hand. So good to meet you. I led them into the living room, our kill box. Dim lights. Ball cap pulled low. Dust mask to obscure my features. They didn't recognize me. My boss is serious about this upgrade, I began. He values efficiency. Richard perked up. Efficiency is our specialty, he said, already reaching for his briefcase. I leaned in. He understands how contracts work. He knows about administrative fees, kickbacks. Karen and Richard exchanged a loaded glance. A man like your boss knows quality comes at a premium, Karen said. He does, I said casually. But he's also a numbers guy. He noticed something odd in the HOA records. Your company, Richard. Suburban Enhancement Services. A lot of payouts. For beautification. Richard's smile wavered. Karen's posture stiffened. We provide a premium service, Richard said defensively. I'm sure you do, I said, smiling slowly. But what he couldn't figure out is how all that money ends up in a personal offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Silence. Total. Karen's face drained of color. Richard's hands clenched. You, Karen hissed suddenly. You're the IT guy. You hacked us. I did, I said standing. And I found everything. This conversation is being recorded. So were the bank transfers. The invoices. The LLC registration. All of it. And that's when Richard snapped. He lunged, not at me, but for the houseplant. The one with the obvious camera lens. He ripped it out and smashed it against the wall. No more tape, he shouted, panting, face wild. But it was already too late. 3 other cameras had captured everything. Audio, video, confession. And now they knew it. Karen's eyes turned cold. Deadly. You think you've won? She spat. You have no idea what you've started. Richard stepped forward again, chest heaving. Where's the backup? He snarled. I didn't answer. Upstairs, I knew Leia's hand was on her phone, ready to call the police. I had promised her no heroics. This wasn't the plan. I had wanted to get them out, then drop the hammer from a distance. But now, they weren't going to walk out quietly. They were dangerous. Desperate. Cornered animals. And that's when I realized this wasn't the climax. This was just the beginning. They wanted the recorder. This was the moment, the tipping point. I could have told them the truth, that everything was live-streamed and secure in the cloud. But a darker idea sparked. They were obsessed with something tangible. A physical object. The tape. A device. So I gave them one. You'll never find it, I said, my eyes flicking to the bookshelf. A classic misdirection. Richard fell for it instantly, tearing at the shelves like a man possessed. Karen whipped out her phone, not to call the police. No, this was something else. Code red. She barked into the phone. Get over here now. My stomach dropped. Who was she calling? Reinforcements? Enforcers? I made a break for the front door, but Richard, faster than I expected, cut me off and shoved me hard. I stumbled, catching myself on the sofa. My heart was a war drum in my chest. Then, Leia's voice thundered through the house. She had patched her laptop mic into the Bluetooth speakers. Get out of my house. The police have been called. They're on their way. It was a bluff, but a damn good one. Karen and Richard froze, glancing toward the windows. That hesitation was all I needed. I walked, not ran, to an old VCR I kept for nostalgia. I ejected a blank tape I'd placed earlier and held it up. Here, I said, tossing it onto the table. This is what you want. Take it and go before the cops arrive. Richard lunged for it like a starved dog grabbing a steak. Desperation trumped reason. They backed toward the door. This isn't over, Karen hissed, eyes ablaze. We will bury you. Then they were gone, tires screeching into the night. I locked the door, hands shaking from the adrenaline. Leia was already descending the stairs, her face stricken but alive. Are you okay? She whispered, wrapping her arms around me. I'm fine, I breathed. We got it. We got all of it. We had won. Or so I thought. 2 days later, the real blow landed. A certified letter arrived, an official notice of condemnation from the city. A tip from a concerned citizen had prompted a drive-by inspection. Our home was now deemed structurally unsound due to unpermitted renovations. We were ordered to vacate within 72 hours. I later learned the inspector was Richard's cousin. They'd photoshopped evidence. Claimed I'd removed a load-bearing wall. Easy lie, there was a demo hammer in my garage for a nursery project I hadn't even started. It was war now. They wanted us out, days before our baby was due. Leia broke down, sobbing. And for a moment, I let despair in. They had rigged the game, used their connections. They had cornered us. But then, despair turned to resolve. Cold, sharp resolve. Because this wasn't just the climax. This was the twist they never saw coming. The VCR tape? Useless. A decoy. The live stream? Solid evidence. But there was more. I had sent the financial data I'd uncovered to a forensic accountant, Stan's nephew. Quiet guy. Brilliant. Thorough. And he had found something far bigger than embezzlement. Karen and Richard weren't just stealing dues. They had orchestrated a multi-year land grab. The original Eagles Landing developer had gone under. They used HOA funds to secretly buy up undeveloped land around the neighborhood for pennies on the dollar. Their harassment wasn't random. It was strategy. They fined, intimidated, and forced out original homeowners. Property values plummeted. They planned to scoop up homes for cheap, package the whole neighborhood, and sell it to a corporate developer for a 9-figure payday. A house? Just the last domino. They thought they were burying me, but I had already dug their graves. The final showdown. The annual HOA meeting, Karen's personal stage, was scheduled for the night before our eviction. It was meant to be her coronation, our public execution. She and Richard strolled into the community clubhouse exuding smug triumph. Karen wore a blood-red power suit. Richard's smirk looked painted on. But this year, they weren't crowning themselves rulers. They were walking into their own execution. Leia and I arrived late, intentionally. Her 9-month belly entered the room before we did. She was calm, proud, unbreakable. I carried a laptop and a projector. Stan followed, visibly nervous but resolute. We sat front row. Karen tapped the mic with a manicured nail. Welcome, neighbors. We have unfortunate but necessary business tonight concerning a dangerous property. I stood. Controlled. Before you continue, Karen, I think the community deserves to see a presentation about the real business of this HOA. A ripple moved through the room. You're out of order, Karen snapped. Make it on the agenda, came a voice from the back. It was Mr. Johnson. Then another neighbor stood. And another. Within seconds, half the room was standing. Karen was stunned. I didn't wait. I set up the projector, aimed it at the wall, and hit play. The evidence. Slide 1. The Shell Company logo. Next to Richard's driver's license. Then came the receipts, embezzled funds, fake invoices, bank transfers into Richard's account. The murmuring grew louder. Then, the audio from my living room. Karen and Richard confessing. Karen, venomous. Richard, panicked. The room fell into stunned silence. Then came the land grab. Property maps. The 9-figure offer from the developer. She's not fining you for your grass, I said, my voice rising. She's bankrupting you. She wants your homes. That broke the dam. The room erupted, not in chaos, but clarity. Guess. Anger. Years of fear connected in an instant. Karen and Richard were pale, cornered. Their masks gone. Richard lunged for my laptop. But he didn't make it. 2 large men from the neighborhood watch stepped in front of him, arms crossed. Karen screamed about lawsuits, right as the clubhouse doors burst open. 2 officers. 1 detective from the white-collar crime division. They had my evidence package. Chain of custody intact. Arrest warrants in hand. They cuffed Karen first. Her final shriek as the cuffs clicked closed was beautiful. 3 weeks later, Hope cooed gently in her bassinet beside me. The baby monitor hummed softly. The war room was gone. This was just our home again. The city had rescinded the condemnation immediately. Karen and Richard? Gone. Their accounts frozen. Their mansion across the street, empty. They'd taken a plea deal. No trial. But years in prison ahead. Justice wasn't just served. It was plated and garnished. The HOA was dissolved. A state-appointed receiver was cleaning up the books. A new, voluntary neighborhood group was forming, one that believed in not bothering people. Stan was elected treasurer, on the condition that Flamingo acquisitions be in the annual budget. Leia sat beside me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder. "You did it," she whispered. "You brought the dragon down." I didn't answer immediately, because I hadn't become a dragon. I had just learned how to use its fire. That afternoon, I took Hope for her first walk. The sun felt warmer, the air cleaner. We passed the winter's empty house. A foreclosure sign stood where Karen once stood with her laser pointer. I looked down at my sleeping daughter. Her peaceful face said it all. Every sleepless night, every bruise, every ounce of fear. It had been worth it. The battle for Willow Lane was over. And we had won.